In life, I feel like oftentimes when something happens bad, they say that, oh, I knew in my gut that something wasn't right? I would trust that. If something's off on your senses about a person, him or her, or the situation or how it's invested, I would trust that. That can be very meaningful, and trust your intuition. All right, Robert, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, well, today's going to be an interesting topic, how to stop a financial advisor from stealing your blind.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. It's something that people don't talk about a lot. I think it's one of those conversations that you dare to talk about in some senses. So I'm excited to have that discussion. So
I agree.
Let's start out. How can a financial advisor rip somebody off?
Well, to be clear, we've talked about in the past fees and stuff of that nature. That's not what we're talking about today. We're not talking about just maybe somebody put you in a proprietary product and locked in with a massive commission and you're locked in a product for 10 years. That's not the ripoff we're talking about.
We're talking about Bernie Madoff.
Exactly.
Or what happened to Tom Brady.
Yep.
Things like that.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
So Bernie Madoff, that's the first example we're going to talk about. So Bernie Madoff, right, what made him unique, chairman of the NASDAQ, leveraged the fact that he had celebrities as clients, and that creates I think, false sense of security, and people do less research than they should on the advisor. Bunch of red flags with him. I think if people would have done a little bit more research when it came to him, they would have seen a few things, right? He created his own statements. The assets were held where he was. It's interesting when it comes to rate of return. The rate of return he was quoting he could make his clients was only 8 to 12, which honestly, a portfolio that you have, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100% stocks, that's not unrealistic over a decade.
Over time.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. If I tell somebody, hey, if they're heavy in equities over a decade, they should expect 8 to 10, 8 to 12. That being said, candidly, last 3 years, right, clients have done well over that. Some clients have done north of 20, but that's not normal. Just because you make somebody over 20% 1 year, to assume you're going to do it over a decade is a wrong assumption. Mm-hmm. And what makes Bernie a little bit more unique is he's pretending he can do 8 to 12, but with no negative years. Mm-hmm. It was every year. That's where it just gets unrealistic.
It'd be nice, but it's not realistic. And it's interesting. We've been doing this about 20 years, and I thought I knew a lot about Bernie Madoff. You know about the Ponzi scheme, you hear about it, and there's some movies that have come out about it. But Netflix did a documentary just 2 years ago on it, and I sat and watched it with my wife Lauren, and it was crazy. Not only what he did to clients, but how it affected his family and his wives, his sons. It's hard to think that people actually do that stuff, but it still exists today, right? That's what happened to Tom Brady.
It can happen. Candidly, I did not watch that Netflix documentary because
it's tough.
It makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't like watching that stuff. I did see the one that Robert De Niro did, the movie a few years ago, I think in 2017 that it came out. Yeah. And I've read a book on it. But I think you just have to be careful, And another thing, by the way, somebody might say, well, you're saying 8 to 12% rate of return is okay over a decade, but perhaps not every year. Just to give somebody an idea of what type of return you should expect, it always changes, right? And one number you should always look at is what the 10-year Treasury is paying. What is a 10-year Treasury? A 10-year Treasury is a government bond. And right now you're at about 4.4-ish. Historically, it's a little bit higher. So if you can guarantee make 4.4% per year over 10 years in a government treasury in today's environment, if anybody's promising you even 7, but let alone 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, there's risk involved. They may not be disclosing it, but there's some form of risk, market risk, credit risk, some type of risk that you have to be aware of. Now, if it were the 1970s and interest rates were really high, 10, 15, 20%, that's a different story. But, I've been an advisor for 22 years. This is we've experienced very low interest rates during that time. And even a few years ago, 10-year Treasury was under 2%. So even less so if somebody's guaranteeing you 7, 8, 9. If it sounds too good to be true, it is.
One of those things you like to say sometimes is there's no free lunch. Yeah. And I like to tell people when they think of when they hear something about, oh, this guarantees 8, 9, 10. I go, if there was an investment out there that guaranteed 10%, everybody would do it. Warren Buffett would do it. And if he's not doing it, then why would somebody else think they're smarter than him? So going back to there's no free lunch. So now there might be people listening thinking, well, yeah, but my portfolio over the last 10 years has done 10, 15, even 20%. But what they may fail to realize is that was the best decade in stock market history. So I think you probably would agree that you can average that. But what you're talking about is not what you can average in a portfolio that has its ups and downs, but like Bernie Madoff when he's trying to tell people, I guarantee you an 8
and
or 10 or 20% every year with nothing down.
100%. So I think what you're saying is 8 to 12 is not unrealistic over time, but to have that every year consistently, no negative year, over a decade, 2 decades, that can't be done. To your point, Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, he didn't do that, and he's got amazing returns. But even it being Berkshire Hathaway loses money from time to time. Typically, 2 out of 10 years are bad.
Now, this happened, and I can't remember the story. Maybe you can, so I apologize. But didn't this happen to an NFL player recently, right?
Yep. I like how you're leading me right along there, Robert. Okay. So this just happened in terms of being public. I read it on ESPN about 6 weeks ago. And again, this is allegedly, right? So more recently, a couple months ago, it kind of became public information. Ex-NFL player for the Miami Dolphins, Pro Bowler safety Reshad Jones, was allegedly defrauded by former advisor Isaiah Williams from January 2022 to March 2024, where he allegedly misappropriated $1.5 million through 133 wire transfers to pay for his lifestyle. And this is just, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy to think that stuff in today's world of technology and just access at our fingertips to know when something happens immediately, that this type of scam can still happen without us knowing about it. So if I'm a consumer, if I'm a client or looking to hire an advisor, how can I potentially avoid those types of scams, those type of advisors?
Yeah. Well, in the case, let's talk about this, an individual incident. That what happened is the advisor had authority, had like a power of attorney for withdrawals, allegedly, right? Again, this is everything's allegedly.
That's a very fine line to be crossing.
Yeah, I can't think of a single good reason why your financial advisor is going to need authority to take money out of the account on your behalf and to send it wherever. I mean, if you want money out of the account, the advisor can bring it to your attention, hey, we need to send X amount to this investment or wherever, but you, the client, you should be involved in endorsing that money movement.
I mean, we know people that love their family but still don't trust their family to have that type of power over their investments and control and money. True. So that's a tough one for an advisor to make that argument.
But I came up with a list of what I would consider kind of low-hanging fruit of things you should be worried about, right? And by the way, this isn't super rare. Super common, I should say, in terms of advisors literally taking the money out. But it happens from time to time. And again, I read the article and I thought it'd be worth spending an episode talking about some pitfalls, so just things you should be aware of not to fall.
Well, and I know Annie upstairs, one of our senior advisors, great lady. She got into this industry because her grandparents were defrauded. And so although it's not common, it happens. And it happens to everyday people. It's not always the pro bowlers, you know?
Well, and you and I, we hear from clients from time to time, but typically when this happens, people don't want to say it because they're embarrassed.
Right.
You know, nobody wants to say they were naive enough to get taken advantage of. Now, again, it's 100% the fault of the person that committed a crime, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I feel like sometimes
you could do your due diligence.
Yeah, you should at least make it, cross your T's, dot your I's. So that being point, I'll go over a few low-hanging fruit. One is if you if you're looking for an advisor or have an advisor, make sure that they have a legit custodian. Mm-hmm. What is a custodian? A custodian is where your investments are held, right? Going back to Bernie Madoff, he was his own custodian. Hence, he could build his own statements.
Right. So, yeah, explain that.
The assets were in his name.
Okay.
Right?
So he has, not only can he invest people's money, but he can literally just take the money. He has access to get his
legally
hands
he's not
on money.
supposed to, but he could, and who's going to be watching it?
Right, because he's not being regulated, because he's his own custodian. He's his own compliance.
That's right.
Okay.
Theoretically, he was still audited, but
he controls the audit. Yeah.
So I would make sure that you're at a legitimate custodian. We custody currently only with Raymond James, but we're not the only legit great custodian. There are plenty other ones. If you have an advisor who uses Fidelity or Charles Schwab, TD Ameritrade, they're all known as the best custodians on a planet.
With Raymond James.
With Raymond James, of course.
Absolutely.
But any of those are legit. I would just make sure you're with a legit custodian. Next thing is, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. Mm-hmm. Somebody's guaranteeing you less risk than the market, yet similar to market returns. There's something going on. There's a type of risk, and you need to be aware of it. Doesn't mean it's a bad investment necessarily, but you need to be aware of it. Do a background check on your financial advisor. We just had a situation recently where
I think I know what you're about to say.
Yeah. We had a client who, without diving into personal stuff, basically just had a terrible situation with an advisor doing bad things. I would argue illegal things to her in her account. And she was looking to fire him and did fire that person, ended up going with us. But I did a quick background, and what she was alleging of him, there was a track record of this happening 5 or 6 times in the last decade. So I would do a background check. There's 2 main websites that you can find this information. They're public websites. First is brokercheck.finra.org. That's brokercheck.finra.org. Or the second one is advisor.info.sec.gov. Advisor with a ER, so ADVISER, info.sec.gov.
And I think if you go to one, the one will take you to the other.
Yeah,
one
the
too,
broker
so
check can send you a link, but in
Right.
case you wanted,
to look them both up. Yeah. Perfect.
Now, if an advisor has a bankruptcy, a DUI, it's on there. Now, nobody's perfect. Again, our full firm, we have all clean records. But let's say your advisor has a bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. If it's one and it happened 20 years ago, maybe you're okay with that, and you're still comfortable working with them. That's fine. But if there's 6 DUIs in the last 6 months and 2 bankruptcies and some liens, again, it's your money. You can still decide to work with them. But I'm not telling you to work or not work with that person. What I'm just saying is be aware.
Yeah.
Go in with your eyes open, and you make the decision with the full knowledge of everything.
They might be a fun person to hang out with, but you might not want to manage your money.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, you're not looking for a friend. You're looking for a financial advisor.
Right.
If I'm having heart surgery, I want whoever the best surgeon is, not somebody who's fun to golf with and tells me a funny joke. I want who's going to do the best thing for us. We've talked about this in the past where I like, oftentimes clients become friends, but that's the approach I'd rather do than, somebody's a friend and then they become a client and then maybe they give you a shot because of that friendship. I would rather somebody give us a shot because we're doing the right job for them. And if we become a friend, that's bonus. But at the end of the day, they're engaging with us to perform a service at a world-class level.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction that you made, or a tidbit that you made, where the U4, the securities license, doing a background check on these people, on advisors, it doesn't just look at their professional record. If a client's ever made a complaint, it looks at their personal life. So nothing's hidden. So you get to know about their professional record and their personal life. And I don't think people realize that, but it's an important tidbit there.
100%.
Yeah.
Next thing is just understanding what you're in. If somebody cannot explain to you what you're in a minute, that's a problem. Right now, private REITs have become a big deal lately. There's a lot of these investments that are kind of confusing to understand. Index annuities, they come with these riders, and if this happens, to your account, then you're guaranteed this. Investments don't need to be that confusing. And if your advisor can't explain it to you, how it works, and your fees, all embedded in a very simple manner, I would argue that's a red flag. Something's going on. Again, if you want to bypass that alert or alarm and still work with them, totally fine. But I would argue you should be able to understand, even if you're not have a finance degree or not in this industry, you should have a pretty good grasp of what your investments are doing.
Not just what they're doing, but you just mentioned it, how they're also getting paid.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. And we've had a podcast on that of tons of ways you can get paid, right? About advisors disclosing fees. There's soft dollars. We're not going to get into how to do all that research on this episode, but there's soft dollars, there's commissions, there's 12B1s. There's a lot of fees that can be embedded that you need to fully understand. Next one is don't fall for titles. A lot of advisors call themselves financial advisors, wealth managers, planners. This is not a regulated industry when it comes to titles. Mm-hmm. When it comes to other things that it's super regulated. But anybody can have that title, and then, oh my gosh, they're a wealth manager. What does that mean? What designations do they have beyond that? What other education or experience? So don't be sold by, president of this, vice president of this. It means relatively nothing.
Or my self-proclaimed title is the best financial advisor on the planet. I'm putting it on my business card. Is that not
legit?
So I thought it was. So what if a client happens to run into all these situations we're talking about? What should they do at that point if they're already there and they feel like they're getting scammed? They feel like something might be going on. What do they do?
Well, before I get that point, I would say last one is power of attorney, right?
Okay.
I would not give a financial advisor a power of attorney on your portfolio in terms of being able to do withdrawals. Okay. Right. Now, to your point, let's say somebody's in a situation like, man, I think this could be messed up, or I would immediately freeze the accounts and try to get the portfolio out of there. There's a word in that industry called an ACAT, where you transfer your investment somewhere else. We were talking about this a few days ago in preparation for today's conversation, and you said, yeah, but if it's frozen, man, what if they don't release it? And that's true. They may not, but if you look at the Bernie Madoff situation, a lot of clients had their assets, and for whatever reason, maybe they didn't know it was a Ponzi scheme, but were able to transfer it out. So my advice would be, if you have any concern, try to immediately get your accounts out. Second, I would reach out to some type of regulator, the SEC or FINRA, and let them know what's going on. And then thirdly, I would get an attorney and help you review everything. Was everything on the up and up, and what's going on?
And then maybe fourth, find a new financial advisor.
Yeah,
trusted financial advisor.
But I would 100%. But I would get your assets protected before you even do that, right? Because if you don't get your assets protected and out of there might not be any money to give you a new advisor.
Right.
So you need to put out the fire first before you figure out where to put all your furniture, where you're going to move it to, if you will.
Well, like I said in the beginning, I was excited to talk about this. I think a lot of people want to hear about these things because this is stuff they normally only see on TV and they don't hear about. But knowing how to avoid it is important. So if you were to give us one takeaway from the entire conversation, what would that be? Like the most important nugget on how to avoid that and what to watch out for? What would you do?
I would say go with your instincts. I would say in life, I feel like oftentimes when something happens bad, they say that, oh, I knew in my gut that something wasn't right. I would trust that. If something's off on your senses about a person, him or her, or the situation or how it's invested, I would trust that. That can be very meaningful, and trust your intuition.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Glenn. Before we head out, we do have a mailbag question.
Let's do it.
And I have a feeling you're going to like the name of this person because their name is also Glenn, but it's two N's.
So it's spelled wrong.
And they're in Tennessee. So,
okay.
So the question is, how do I know if I'm putting the right assets in the right accounts? Or in the right account?
Yeah, there's a million ways we could talk about that. So I'm gonna take a single lane because this could be an hour conversation. So I'm gonna approach this from a tax standpoint.
Okay.
So from a tax standpoint, if you have, let's say you have $2 million, and $1 million of it is in an IRA, and $1 million of it's in a brokerage account. In other words, a taxable account. All things equal, let's say maybe you're retired or near retirement, I would shift more of your fixed income into the IRAs, right?
Why?
Great point, because most of your fixed income is going to be taxed at ordinary income. Now, there might be a listener that says, well, what happens if I have a municipal bond where it's tax-free? Most of them are. Then obviously, yes, you would put that in a brokerage. But in this environment, most of my career, for most clients, it's going to be much more attractive to have corporate bonds, meaning Coca-Cola, Walmart type bonds, because you can get a higher yield, pay the taxes, and you still net more than you would in a muni bond. You need to do the math. It's not like that 100% of the time, but frequently it is, has been our experience. So what I would do is I would put the investments that spit out in gains or income that's taxed at your income level. I would tend to shift more of that money in your IRAs. Why? Because when you take out money out of if it's a traditional IRA, you're going to pay income tax no matter what, right? If it's a Roth, okay, it's tax-free no matter what. But either case, what is the highest, most likely the highest product or investment capital gain or dividend or income that you're going to pay? Most likely it's going to be from your fixed income. So I'd put that in your IRAs or Roths, basically your qualified accounts, and I would lean more of your stocks where you're going to get your qualified dividends come from, which for most people is going to be less than their income bracket. You're also going to have your long-term capital gains, and lastly, you're going to get your stepped-up cost basis, right? So if I have, let's say I put in $10,000 in Apple 20 years ago, and now it's worth a couple $100K. When I pass away in that taxable account, there's a stepped-up cost basis. So now my cost basis is $200K, and my children do not pay a capital gain on the difference of what I paid it and not paid it. You get that benefit in a brokerage account, right? Had I done that same investment in an Apple in an IRA or a Roth, there's no stepped-up cost basis. I'm just going to pay income tax when I withdraw those funds.
And if I could add, I would probably say also it's important, and we did a podcast on this, to do a financial plan and have different buckets, have that traditional IRA, the Roth, the brokerage accounts, and of course that's going to depend on age, where somebody's out, when they want to retire. But it's important, you just said, it's important to do the math and understand where those assets are coming from, and have a financial advisor that's savvy enough to understand current tax laws and where your assets are to minimize taxes in retirement.
Yep, 100%. Yeah. To reiterate that, the advice I just gave, I think, is going to apply 95% of people. There's always going to be exceptions, which, to your point, that's why you want to do the financial plan, to let it crunch the numbers and see what's going to net you the most amount of money. But in most cases, I think it's going to be what we just discussed.
Well, awesome, Glenn. Again, thank you. And I want to thank the other Glenn for sending in the question. As a reminder, if you do have any questions, feel free to tag us or put it in the comments section of the videos, or send it to gds@gdswealth.com. Thank you for tuning in today. And Glenn, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.